Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Files Obscura podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Anchor app. If you're like me and probably didn't know where to go to start a podcast or didn't know what to do, then you'll be very glad to hear that the Anchor app is free to download and gives you everything you need available on your phone or your laptop. And you'll be given all the tools you'll need to edit, to play music in the background, to have live guests record your episodes with you, and so much more. Anchor also allows you to distribute your podcast anywhere that you want to be heard, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the list goes on. I know ourselves, so far, we have at least 7 platforms. And another great thing is that you're able to start making money for your podcast with absolutely no minimum listenership. So if you're interested in starting tomorrow, you can also start recording advertisements tomorrow if you were so interested. But everyone goes at their own pace. All you need to know is that this is everything you need to make a podcast and so much more to help you along the way. It's user-friendly and easy to figure out, as time goes on and you figure yourself out. So all you need to do is go download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Once again, that was anchor.fm to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Files Obscura. We're once again introduced with Aaron.
And Vladimir.
And today we are going to be looking at a particularly heavy subject, not something that most of us learned in school. It's not found in our history books, but it really should be. Today we're talking about Black Wall Street. I'm sure, if you're here from last week, you heard that that's going to be today's subject matter. And, before we really get into it, there's just been so much going on lately. I mean, hell, today, before I came over here, I was telling you about the news we found from Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, he's a vegetable right now?
Yeah, supposedly because of some open heart surgery, but it's North Korea, so...
So we don't know what's true, what's not true, yeah.
It's just been so much going on, as far as news. I heard, I think I mentioned it to you last week, about a shooting up in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, you told me about it.
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel that I personally follow for a lot of Star Wars based content. It's called Eckhart's Ladder.
Oh, I love that guy.
He's the one who, made a video about it. He even started, I believe, a GoFundMe page and was able to raise, I think, over 10,000. Don't quote me because I could be very wrong. But
I personally didn't open the video yet.
Yeah. But he raised a lot of money real quick to help, with the events of what happened. I personally did not look into the story. I don't know what happened. I don't know who's involved. But, it's a tragedy, even if it's not an American tragedy,
Yeah.
It sucks. It doesn't matter where bad things happen, especially with what we're about to cover today,
Honestly, any tragedy happening during this time just makes things worse for everyone.
It does. And I think for me personally, that's why it's so important that we have things to focus on. Lucky for us, we have our podcast to focus on with all of our own individual researches for episodes that we're doing. I know right now I'm primarily doing the research, but now you're starting to do your own.
Yeah, I've been working on some research. Should be done pretty soon. Very interesting true crime case.
Okay, well, before we start talking about that and spoil the beans on that one, we're starting to figure out our structure. We're figuring out schedules and all that.
Yeah.
We're trying to get ahead on a bunch of research, which you'll see, especially with today's topic, Black Wall Street. It's just one of those events that there's a lot of information about a particular subject, but it's part of a grander conversation. With Black Wall Street, we're dealing with race. Race is going to be a big thing. And know that now and forever, especially on this podcast, if I ever say something that seems racially motivated or hateful, know that I'm primarily speaking from notes. I'm speaking from the viewpoints of people that I've been reading information from. And, this was based around the times. This happened in the 1921. Heavily racist time. It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
I personally don't like the discussion of race. Not that I think it's, not worth mentioning, but in an idealized, progressed, future for ourselves, I would imagine that race wouldn't even be relevant anymore. which is why I don't personally talk about it. But I also recognize it is important to remember and discuss it, and learn from it. Most
Yeah.
importantly.
I,
So,
I was just gonna say I actually think it's and in my personal opinion, I think it's very important to still discuss these issues.
oh, very much
Mostly
so.
because like if we don't discuss it, it's like
It's lost to history, which this more or less was.
yeah,
Um, but I just felt that needed to be addressed. More so that I never mean anything harmful or wrong towards any individual. I just felt like this was something that needs to be discussed. This needed to shed some light, but I also didn't want you to feel like I am not doing this subject justice. Because there are certain topics that I omit information, whether it be for a time sense kind of deal, because I don't want this podcast to run for hours and hours on hours on end. But at the same time, I can't deliver every bit of information on this one topic because of subjects like when it comes to race. There's always threads of stories or relevant information that if you follow that trail long enough, it leads to other information and other stories that are worth their own subject and worth their own time. So it's hard to find that balancing act between focusing on the topic specifically and doing justice to, talking about all the other circumstances that were around.
yeah.
So I don't want it to come off like I'm not doing my research or I'm not doing the story justice, but at the same time, I don't want it to be overboard, just a bombardment of information and I'm running through things too quickly to try to make up, pace with time. And it's just, so just blanket apologies if there's anything I miss, if there's anything I've gotten wrong, like I always say. Because again, the point of the show is to start conversation, not to just be a textbook.
Of course.
So I'm gonna get things wrong. It happens. I may missay things or misinterpret certain actions. I don't know. I'm only human.
And I would say with any case that we talk about, especially true crime cases, it's definitely worth doing your own research.
Oh, of course.
Even
of course.
after the episode, look into it yourself. See, like if you find a subject particularly interesting, there's loads of information on almost everything online.
So, like I said, this was a particularly difficult subject for me to just read into because I mean, I may not be a black individual, but that doesn't mean I can't, feel sympathy for everyone who suffered here. Doesn't mean I can't be mad at the people who perpetrated it. And I just think, how can you let fear just rule you so much? And then I look at today, I look at everything that's going on now, Trump's policies, his fucking horde of young adults and even the older generation still pining after him and all that. It doesn't make any sense to me. How can you be so oblivious? How can you be so stupid?
And honestly,
and also real quick, I also know nothing's just clearly black and white. I know that.
Yeah.
So,
but I also feel like you're getting into a good you're bringing something up really interesting. We shouldn't just trust any individual.
No, of course.
Yeah,
of course not.
Even people with good intentions, like you can't just blatantly believe like everything they do is right.
Yes.
And the fact that so many people will just take whatever Trump says and treat it as gospel, like no.
Yeah. It definitely pays to do your own research. It definitely pays to pay attention to what's going on. Because like I said, even in my personal life, I know like right now, everyone more or less, depending on the stipulations in your life, is getting a stimulus check in America.
Of course, yeah.
I'm supposed to be getting mine, but one thing I don't think most people realize is you got to pay taxes on that. Yeah, no, that's not just a free $1,200. It is was it a 1099, and next year when it comes to taxes, you have to file that $1,200 stimulus check that was more or less forced for you to give, depending on how you look at it. Because someone like my mother actually doesn't need the check, but because she's forced to get it, she'll have to pay extra taxes on it. Now you look at someone like me, I could really stand to use the check, but next year, whether I'm better or worse than I am now, I don't know. I still have to pay for that, and that's not something that, most people just know. My mom, she worked a lot in accounting. That's how I found that information out, because my mom is the type of person to read the fine print, and she informed me, and that's how I learned. That's how, now I'm trying to plan for it. You know, I'm setting money aside into my savings account, so I can't have access to it because, you know, I have to go through the whole 3-day process before it comes out and all that. It's just going to sit there until it comes time for taxes. I can pull that money out and then pay my additional dues then. You know, and you know, there's so much going on lately that pays to be informed, but, you know, I can't change the world.
Yeah.
I can only change mine, you know, which is, again, can't wait for that check to come in because I'm holding my breath. There's currently a van I'm looking to get. Very good van. That's more or less cheap. The dude kind of just wants it to be gone. But I just haven't been able to go out there yet because I'm getting screwed over. And I don't know where my stimulus check is. It was supposed to come in yesterday. And it didn't come in.
I mean, I'm sure it'll come in eventually.
Well, it's because it's trying to send to an account I had last year, which I no longer have. And it's not, the IRS system hasn't updated with my current tax information, which I already filed, you know, a while ago. So it's not updating that information. So it keeps thinking I still live in Illinois. And so it keeps trying to send everything over there. I don't have that account anymore, so it keeps getting routed back. I just want to take a look at my information and be like, look, this is where this guy lives. Just send him a check there. I can't do that. Well, I can. I just haven't gone through the process. It's all a headache. I just want my van. I don't want it gone. It sucks. Yeah, but this isn't a general podcast for us to talk about our life. We came here to talk about Black Wall Street. So you know what? I think that's what we're going to do right now.
Yeah, let's get to it.
All right. So as always, Vlad, 2 truths and a lie.
Okay.
So our first statement, you know, Black Wall Street, which we will get into, was considered an anomaly. It was a very rich black, you know, neighborhood, enclave, whatever term you want to use to describe this area where they lived at. But it was considered an anomaly given the fact that it prospered in the Deep South in the 1920s, or even starting a little bit, you know, before that. In the height of like Jim Crow laws, and around this time you got to understand too, Oklahoma was subject to some of the harshest discrimination and segregation laws around this time in the United States, and these guys prospered. You know, so you know it's not like you had a Black Wall Street every 300 miles per city or whatever. You know, these guys, you know, they were pretty unique, and it sucks to see them gone. You know, but then we also have our statement number 2. You know. This was also known as the Tulsa Race Riot, which was described aptly because it described the battle-like conditions between, you know, the unfortunate black and white, race issues that were going on, and you know, many people died. Like, I'm not joking when I say hundreds of people died because of this conflict. You know, fights from one side and the other. You know, just pure atrocities. You know, you could, if you search on Google and look at images about you look up Tulsa race riots, you can see just the devastation. I mean, it's ridiculous. But then, of course, you know, our last little statement today, you know, explains how there's an estimated 300 people that lay buried in unmarked mass graves still today in, you know, the Tulsa, what's it called, the Tulsa area. I'm trying to remember the map in my head that I saw where I was getting this information from. Some of the bodies that people believe are buried there are located near where the Black Wall Street is. Also, it was actually called Greenwood Avenue. So there's a couple places near Greenwood Avenue where people believe that a lot of these burials are buried, and then there's another cemetery that's a little farther away that people believe some of these individuals were buried. So we have 3 statements: that Black Wall Street was considered an anomaly, that the Tulsa race riot was, you know, a battle between, you know, blacks and whites, a literal race war in Tulsa, and then, you know, that there were over 300 people, estimated give or take, you know, buried in unmarked mass graves and still in Tulsa, Oklahoma today.
You came up with a really good one.
I tried. I struggled with this.
Each one of these sounds.
It sounds so plausible.
It sounds plausible.
But one of these are a lie. Which one's a lie?
I'm gonna go ahead and say, this is really tough.
Yeah,
you really did make it tough.
Yeah, I wanted you to think.
I'm gonna go ahead and say it was the second one.
You think it's the second one?
The reason I say that is because I don't know anything about the story. I really
Granted,
don't.
Most people actually don't.
Yeah, but I'm gonna go ahead and assume that this wasn't much of a war, but maybe close to a genocide.
You think it was closer to a genocide, not like an actual battle in Tulsa?
No, I think a lot. It was more just being completely overpowered.
All right.
And just because I know, like, oh man, knowing
Well,
how
you also got to understand too. Like I said, it's true. Black Wall Street got its name for a reason.
yeah,
These were black individuals in a completely black, neighborhood, environment, whatever term you want to use. They prospered better than a lot of the white people around them. So is it? Because with a lot of property, you can also imagine, the same poor average black individual in Georgia could have probably afford a gun and a small shack, whereas the same individual who lived in, Greenwood Avenue would probably be able to afford not only his own house, but also, hired help, probably a variety of guns, cars even. Who knows?
Yes.
I didn't delve too much into that specific research, but from what I saw, the possibility was there. So you sure? You're sold on 2?
I'm gonna stick to 2.
You're gonna stick to 2.
Yeah.
All right, audience. Well, we're about to dive into this, so figure out. I don't know why I said that. Figure out your answers, and we will dive into some supplementary information real quick.
Awesome.
As always, it's important to understand our history. I decided to go back to Abraham Lincoln, who issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863 during the Civil War, which was used to attempt to liberate all freed slaves, but due to its wording and writing, it was very flawed and limited in many ways. One of these restrictions was that it only dealt with slaves that were from the South. So if there was any slave plantations that were still in the North or considered Union territory, they were still subjugated to, slavery laws up in the North. There was also limiting issues about slaves who were freed, about certain times when they were freed, and just, how far this could extend, how far does the law carry this? Like I said, really complicated wording that really limited it. But then, of course, as time moves on, we have on December 6th, 1865, the 13th Amendment was ratified, which generally just abolished slavery from being a legal practice, except as a form of punishment from a courthouse for a crime the individual committed. That's why, when you think of, people in the 30s and 40s, and you imagine the ball and chain and everyone's just minding the pickaxe.
Yeah.
It's a form of slavery, but it was considered illegal and justified for whatever crime that individual committed. That's why now today too, in a much lesser extent, you'll see, criminals or, people who are, what's the term called? What's the term? It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, God, it's killing me.
Incarcerated?
No, it's lesser than that. Community service.
Okay.
Community service. That's why you see a lot of people, a lot of kids, they'll get a choice. You go to jail or you pick up litter for 60 days, You can argue that's an extent of this law, which I think it is, but there's a lot more legalese that I don't know that would describe if it is or not.
I'm sure, like, at the time, any person who's like, ooh, I can legally own a slave. Like,
yeah, it's a whole lot of, complications that is not worth getting into.
Yeah.
But that was the 13th Amendment. On July 9th, my brother's birthday, actually, 1868, the 14th Amendment was ratified. This amendment essentially made any person born in America a citizen of their state and country, which means if you were born in America, you were a citizen of the state you were born in and the United States of America. This is a big thing that I want to discuss when we, discuss Dreamer Babies and the DACA and all that, and, because, my mom's a foreigner.
It feels like it's something that recently a lot of...
It's recently become a big issue, and especially with, Trump's administration.
Yeah.
And again, when we talk about immigration and foreign policy and all that, probably a very boring episode. I'll try to jazz it up a bit, but it is a subject I do feel is important to talk about. That will be brought back up, and the consequences and the amendments and sections that were added to that years on. Because the 14th Amendment, whenever I was looking it up, actually went on to it was Library of Congress or something website, whatever website like held that information. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was. I was reading all the information per, amendment because I was trying to scroll down and find the right ones. This one out of the 3, because there was also the 15th, which we'll get into, this one had the longest amount of sections and the longest sections, that were out of the 3, the most words written per section, I mean. So there's definitely a lot that goes into that, and as time came on and added to it. But then, February 3rd, 1870, that's when the 15th Amendment was ratified, and this gave the right to vote for every legal citizen. So, that's where we get, I learned a little, I forget what it's called, like mnemonics or whatever, free men vote. That's how I remember 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. That's what they did. The 13th freed, the 14th made them men, and the 3rd and the 15th gave them the right to vote. That's how I always remember those three. But I hate to admit, for the longest time, I always said it was the 11th, 12th, and 13th Amendments.
Okay,
so I fucked that up.
So you're off by.
So I was confused for a while. So I learned a lot more about other amendments and rights that we have while trying to research this. So yeah, I even made myself laugh and was reading the Prohibition Amendment just to have fun. It was there.
Why not?
So, but. These were the amendments that allowed, black individuals to not only be legal residents and citizens of the United States, but it gave them
a
voice, more or less. Of course, this was also before women's suffrage, another topic worth its own, deep dive. So black women, obviously didn't get a say but black men did. But of course, we're still, we're still in very heavily, anti-black, mentality. So, you can imagine nationwide, they're still subjugated to literacy tests and stuff like that really segregated them even more. There was even the 3/5 compromise, which is something I didn't look into, which I really should have, because I don't feel confident talking about it right now and getting information wrong. But I know that was also another big contributor that affected, black votes. But more or less, just quick summary, it just meant that every black vote was only worth 3/5 of what a white man's vote was. So it would take even more of a black individual's vote to make any significant change.
That's awful.
It is awful. It's terrible.
Basically, to the law, it's like, oh, you're only like
it's like a quarter of you.
It's like only a quarter of a man.
It's like you're one of us, but not one of us.
Yeah,
it's a fucked up mentality. It really is.
I will say though, like, it is amazing seeing how long it took, because even after this, there's even more like progress we had to make.
Oh, dude, we're about to talk about the KKK.
Yeah, like this shit, man, it went on for such a long time.
For a very long time.
Dude, I remember I don't know if you ever saw the movie Hidden Figures.
I think I have, but I've seen so many things and my memory's so jacked, it's hard to tell.
Oh, it's really good. It's about the ladies who worked at NASA, the mathematicians who worked at NASA. They're all black.
I know what you're talking about. Yes, dude, that is one of my favorite movies.
It's really good.
It is so good.
What surprised me most is when I was first watching this, I was watching this with like 2 other people. And throughout the movie, I'm like, wait, are you telling me like even after all this stuff, like they were still treated like this? And it's
yes, it is ridiculous. Oh my God, it is ridiculous. And I'll probably have a little analogy that I wanted to say towards the end of this whenever I bring up my opinions on race and all that. Why it just doesn't fundamentally make sense to me, especially given that Black Wall Street existed. If Black Wall Street and other, prosperous black neighborhoods never actually existed, it'd be hard for me to argue what I want to argue later. But let's keep going, because there's a lot more supplementary information that I try to fit in that I felt was relevant. Right. Especially with the KKK, they were not directly involved, to my knowledge. Let me just say that, to my knowledge. They were not directly involved in, the Tulsa Race Riot, the Black Wall Street Massacre, whatever name you know it as. However, they were a big catalyst for the environment that bred it, at least. So that's why we're talking about it now, but they are definitely worth their own deep dive as well, because they've got their own conspiracies and things that are worth diving into. I really don't want to talk about it right now because I was about to. But on Christmas Eve in 1865, this is whenever the KKK was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee, and was quickly changed from a secret societal organization into a paramilitary force, trying to reverse progressive Reconstruction ideas and activities. They were trying to stop the government from being, pro-black people, give them rights and stuff. They were trying to stop the efforts, even went so far as, going to Congress and trying to pass bills. Yeah, that happened, trying to legalize racism, which for a long time it more or less was. But you know, around this time, whenever they first formed, you know, their leader, a former Confederate general named Nathan Bedford Forrest with two R's. Hey, Forrest Gump. That's, you know, where he got his name from.
All right.
Was from this individual. But he would be the first KKK Grand Wizard. If you don't know what the Grand Wizard is in the KKK, it is basically the head honcho of head honchos in this criminal organization. And they are criminal. I will not dispute that. They are terrorists, and even the FBI lists them as terrorists.
Absolutely.
Yes. But something interesting I did not know, which is the whole reason I started writing about this, was because Forrest in 1869, he actually unsuccessfully tried to disband the KKK entirely. The reason being, he just grew away from their excessive violent tactics and ideas. He grew disillusioned with them while this was all going on, but at some point, and I did not look into it, which is why I say this is worth its own subject in the future, he just wound up not agreeing with their tactics anymore. I won't go on a limb and suggest that he was no longer racist. More often than not, he probably remained just as racist, if not more. He just didn't like how the KKK was handling their business. That's why he tried to disband it. Because, like I said, they were becoming excessively violent. And when I'm about to talk about the Red Summer here, you'll see just what I mean.
I can imagine.
Yeah. The KKK, you know, they went through two revivals during the 20th century, and they're going through a revival now, in the 21st. But their second revival happened during this time, during the 1910s and 20s, because of the rising immigration that was going on. It's when a lot of my personal family, the Italians and Irish in my family, you know, were coming over, you know, because both my parents actually did their genealogy test. That's how I know so much about what happened with my family. And this was around the time that they came in. My dad's predominantly Irish. My mom has a lot of Eastern European and Italian in her. So just in case you were curious.
All right.
There's a lot more into it, but they're not really that important. But then the Red Summer of 1919 happened. This was an event that lasted from late winter, so we're talking about January, February, around that time, and lasted all the way to early autumn.
Wow.
Yeah. Where it was pretty much nothing but just many anti-black race attacks that happened in over 36 cities across the United States. So you got to imagine, we're dealing with almost 40 different outbreaks of just racial attacks across the United States in 1 year. Imagine hearing that now on like CNN or something. Like, unfortunately, like we're dealing with tragedies in the last decade of school shootings. You know, imagine every 2 or 3 months you hear about, you know, 4 more, you know, big cities suffering. And to an extent we do with cop shootings and all that, where it's unprovoked. And again, subject for another time. You know,
the craziest thing about this, though, is this is the time when, like, if like a good amount of people in the United States, if they heard this, they would just shrug it off.
It's whatever, because unfortunately, around this time, most of them were still predominantly white and predominantly didn't give a fuck. They didn't care because they saw blacks as lesser people, and it's a mentality that just kept brewing hate. You know, you can only push a group of people so much. You know, it's just terrible. I mean, hell, one of the things I read during, you know, the Red Summer, Elaine, Arkansas, they reported the highest number of fatalities during this whole event. They had between 100 and 240 black individuals, and 5 white people died during this event. I felt that was important to put in there. Out of all of that, how disproportionate is that? Up to, and it's only estimated, up to 240 black people and only 5 white people died in this, you know, racial outbreak of hate.
That's awful. I mean,
yeah, it's truly awful. It's terrible.
And
you know,
but I'm guessing that there wasn't a lot of like military like involvement in this, right?
No, not even. In some instances, you know, the black community did fight back, like in Chicago and Washington D.C., who suffered 38 and 15 deaths respectively. You know, but there was a lot of injuries, and Chicago especially suffered a lot of property damage, you know, during this. But, you know, I was glad to hear that at least some of these communities did try to actively fight back, you know. There was a story that I came across, but is very well self-contained in its own thing. And it actually happened long before this, but it was kind of like a black revolution that happened. It was led by a white abolitionist and a couple of other former freed slaves. who were more or less just trying to get the blacks to rise against the status quo, if you will. They robbed train cars, to my knowledge, and attacked several businesses from, rival entities that were trying to stop them and stuff. Eventually, to my knowledge, if I'm remembering, they were all hanged. So, didn't happen. Obviously, we don't have Black America, but it was, first notable attempt that I felt was at least worth recalling. But like I said, it was a subject that is very well self-contained to be its own thing. So when I get back to that, I'll do the research and properly address everyone and the events that happened. But yeah, it was horrible, And you got to understand, the Red Summer, it was an event that happened in 1 year. However, it shouldn't be taken as every year, 1918 and 1920, were peaceful. There was nothing that happened. There were still a bunch of racial outbreaks of fighting, I should say. I really need to find a better way to word that. I don't know why I keep wording it that way. But these outbreaks of fights and just violence and just, genocide, more or less, depending on the event, they kept happening and would continue to happen all the way up through the 70s.
It was just a particular time period.
Yeah, where it was just
concentrated.
Aggressively violent.
Yeah.
Don't know why. I couldn't find any information that talked about that, Also going around this time, a lot of people were afraid of black communities because you got to understand, 1919, this was, the end of World War I as well. You had a bunch of black individuals who went out, and tried to fight for the U.S. One particular group, and these are heroes and heroes to the day that we all die. The Harlem Hellfighters was an all-black military group, and they were sent over during World War I to try to fight for the Americans, during this time. But no American soldier wanted to fight with them. But the French, they took them in with open arms. They gave them better equipment. They gave them better, rifles and taught them better tactics. They really took care of them because they were more than happy to have them there. And, praise the French for that, really.
Yeah. The fact that they accepted help no matter what.
And well, it's not even that. The Harlem Hellfighters were one of the most prolific fighting force or units in, the U.S. Army at that time. I think, and I could be completely wrong, because I'm pulling this out of my ass, but I think they suffered the fewest casualties, out of any unit during World War I.
Wow.
It was either that or they had like the highest kill count or service hours or something like that. It was some extreme measure that really, stated not only how effective these guys were, but how necessary they are just, to have as individuals, and how far they were willing to go to fight for a country that didn't give a rat's ass about them, It's terrible.
It really is.
But, with that never went away. The hatred never went away. And after the war, many people were also beginning to fear that because, like in Russia during this time, the Bolshevik Revolution really started, spreading and growing influence in, Russia and Eastern Europe. They were afraid that these communist ideas would start to rise in black communities. And to an extent it did. But it actually helped them. And like I said, I'll get to that when we talk about its growth and all that. But they were afraid that the black communities would push for a more communist idea and really challenge the American mentality. I say with big air quotes. And they just used that as an excuse to treat it as a personal attack against them.
Now, was this before the whole obviously, I'm guessing it's before the Cold War and the big old fear of communism that
this was before the Red Scare. This was before McCarthyism. It wasn't like you would imagine in the 70s. It wasn't that level of fear. However, it did pop up enough in what I was reading in certain articles that I felt worth mentioning here. It's not like how we'd imagine Nazis today. Fuck Nazis. We don't have that mentality. That wasn't their mentality towards the communism and that idea. But they were well aware of it enough to know that, it could be a problem. They just associated it with black individuals, whether as another reason to hate them or from something they were observing, and then use that as a reason to hate them.
Yeah.
So, Like I said, this was one of those times where it just wasn't worth getting too deep into that information.
Honestly, it just kind of sounds like it's a convoluted reason.
It is. It's all convoluted. It's all stupid. It's all retarded. But it happened, and we can't ignore it. And again, also, different times. I can't speak for that time. I can't speak for prohibition. I can't speak for women's suffrage. I can't speak for civil rights. I can't. Unfortunately, I am a cis white male that lives in the 21st century. But I don't think, that my opinion should be any less, which is also something that I've experienced to a degree with certain friends of mine. But again, this isn't really a debate or discussion about social politics today. So I'm going to leave that on the table. We'll talk about it when we get to social politics in the future, if we do. I may not. Just because, like I said, it's all convoluted. And in my opinion, it's overcomplicated for this generation and the next, as I like to put it. And if people want to know my opinions or why I say that, I'll talk about it at another time. But I feel like that's a very valid view for me to have. But also important to know is that during this time, civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson is the one who coined the term Red Summer, while he worked for the NAACP, the National Association for Advancement of Colored People, and would actually actively try. He would actually start peaceful protests to combat a lot of the violence that was going on. So that's what helped subside it. Was James's attempt to kind of cull the violence.
And we're still this is still during the period of all these.
This was right before 1920, right before the start of the Roaring '20s.
Gotcha.
So, so now that we got all that supplementary information out of the way, a lot of the events and the mindsets that really brewed, this mentality.
Yeah.
So to talk about Oklahoma real quick, during 1889, 1891. Around that time is whenever they were really trying to push Native Americans off of certain tribe lands or relocate them. In Tulsa, Oklahoma specifically, it used to be a Native American reservation where this plot of land, the Greenwood Avenue, would eventually be. Eventually, we would have a man named O.W. Gurley. He was a very wealthy black landowner who had resigned from a presidential appointment under Grover Cleveland to strike out on his own. He wanted to be his own man. He wanted to be his own businessman. And you know what? I can respect that.
Absolutely.
He is one of the two big prominent figures that led to Black Wall Street's rise in development. He was, I believe what I read is kind of confusing. Certain articles had dates that were back and forth, so it's hard to say for sure. But I'm pretty sure that he was the first individual to go there. He's the reason it started. In 1906, Gurley would move to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and buy 40 acres to which he said should be only sold to colored folk. And his first business was a rooming house, which was located on a dusty trail near the Frisco track, the Frisco Railroad tracks, which would later be one of the defining borders of Greenwood Avenue. And the name, also real quick, the name Greenwood Avenue is based off of a city in Mississippi, which I believe had personal ties to Gurley's life. I didn't dive down that rabbit hole because Mississippi has its own history of race and issues there, so I didn't want to just dive into something else. So I don't know for sure. But,
it sounds like this guy's making a lot of good decisions. The fact that he's only selling black people is actually brilliant.
Well, again, but it also leads into what we were talking about, communist ideas. He's, trying to share the wealth and make it equal.
Oh, I by the way, I don't blame him whatsoever.
No, and this is one of those few times where I am all for it. I am 100% for it.
At this time, white Americans were just known for stealing from literally everyone. I mean, dude, America was...
Are you kidding me? This is the time period where we glorify bank robbers. Are you kidding me? John Dillinger, Babyface Nelson. Shit, I had one more on the tip of my tongue and I just forgot it. I can't remember.
But I just love the fact that this guy's... He's like, you know what? If you're going to play like that, I'm going to play like that.
Literally, he just wants to create a community where he can be fine. And I can think of nothing better.
Dude.
I can think of nothing more morally, holy.
He's doing a great thing.
Exactly. And I personally believe that choices are defined by the circumstances you make them in. That is my personal belief. So if you purely, you didn't know the context of the time period, you didn't know the individuals involved, you just had X bought this and only sold to X individuals, you don't know that information, it seems very, communistic or cultish or whatever, and it's very easy from that kind of view to point that out and be like, that's wrong, it's going to lead to this, that, and the other. But when you really add the context of the information, I can think of no better solution for him to have done. That's exactly what I would have told him to do. Yep. Keep this amongst your community. Don't let it get out because they will fucking ruin it.
I do love the irony of the fact that this land was stolen from Native Americans.
And
this guy's like, all right, well let's keep playing with that rule. And now it's. He didn't steal from Native Americans.
No, he bought the land from the U.S. government, who stole it from the Native Americans.
Yeah. And now he kept it for the black people.
Essentially, I didn't get any quotes or anything about why he did it specifically, but I think it's pretty easy to assume he wanted a safe community to live in.
Of course,
he wanted something where people can feel proud to live and just home,
especially at this time.
It was one thing I wrote was that he would often give out loans, like personal loans, for people wanting to start a business. And I don't remember exactly where, but on one website I even saw that sometimes he would tell people to not pay him back, just pay it in the community. There was sayings that a dollar that came into, Black Wall Street would exchange hands 19 times before it left again,
So this whole place was it was nothing before he came.
It was nothing but dirt and dust.
All right.
So then he started, making a business here. He, like I said, he made a boarding house where people would come in and live for a time. People would come from all around, but mostly a lot in Mississippi, actually, to find life here, in the segregated world that they live in. They were able to find this little black enclave, and began to grow and prosper. Like I said, Gurley would offer money to other black individuals to start businesses and to help with homes and all that, and really just encourage this communal growth. And again, I can do nothing but commend the man. I'm all for this. Like I said, even if it is for a racial divide for your community. Like I said, my personal beliefs are dependent upon the time I live in. But this man, I would have told him to do the exact same thing. I cannot think of anything better to have done.
Yeah.
But eventually, as the place would grow, Greenwood Avenue would have to be defined, and it's, by 4 roads, Pine Street to the north, Lansing Street to the east, Archer Street and the Frisco Railroad would border the south, and Cincinnati Street would border the west. This would define, a approximately 40 square block little environment for all these black individuals to live. Now, we're going to talk about another important individual that I keep seeing. His name was J.B. Stratford. And first off, can I say, what a fucking name. J.B. Stratford. That is a man you don't fuck with. Yeah. I don't care. I don't need to see this dude's face. I don't need to know his history. I hear that, I'm thinking, this dude's got some money. This dude's got some power.
Stratford.
Stratford. That's a strong name.
That's the name for I don't know, I'm thinking about people who have money.
Yeah.
It's badass. It's pretty
badass.
Badass.
It is. What makes me like these type of names first is that the first name is initialized. The middle name is initialized. The only one that matters is this fucking Stratford.
Yeah.
That is all you need to know, and you know who this guy is. That's why I love names like this.
Yeah.
I don't know. A little weird, but when I research stuff like this and I come across that, that's the first thing that comes to my head is I can respect that,
That's a cool name, yeah.
It is a cool name. But Stratford was another wealthy black entrepreneur who moved to Tulsa in 1899. And he's the guy who really pushed for the idea that the community and black people in general would be able to prosper if they pooled their resources, and really focus on just themselves, for the time being. And whenever he came in and, had other businesses supporting each other and often give out loans and pay for other property and help other individuals, this would be what really spurs development. Of course, there's other individuals who came in, other, prominent black individuals in this community who were really, well respected or well liked for one reason or another. But these were the two that I found to be the biggest, contributors to the growth of Black Wall Street. Obviously, the guy who bought the property first, and the guy who helped, encourage, their economic growth. Stratford would, he would buy a lot of real estate and exclusively only sell it to black individuals, and he would subdivide plots of properties to other individuals to make houses and stuff like that. That's how, people were able to afford, their own houses. And, he would wind up being so wealthy that he would own what's known as the Stratford Hotel in Greenwood, which was, offered the same amenities which you could find downtown in Tulsa, but those amenities were only served to white individuals. You can find the same thing here in Greenwood for every black individual who comes in and stays. And it was, for a while, it was also known as the largest hotel owned by a black man in the United States at this time.
Huh.
Yeah. So, great, good on him, really. Good on Stratford. That is, because I couldn't even imagine owning a hotel now, So for him to own the largest black hotel in America at this time, is like, I can't be anything but impressed. Even color aside, time aside, history aside, just the things that these two men did, is inspiring.
Yeah.
It really is, Unfortunately, we come to May 30th, 1921, where this beautiful dream, where black doctors, hotel owners, grocery store owners, mechanics, this dream of a black society that prospered, it wasn't a dream anymore, it was reality, would be shattered. This is the part that I got to that really made it hard to read from this point on, but it's important history. So on May 30th, 1921, a young 19-year-old black shoeshiner named Dick Rowland would go to a building in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma, called the Drexel Building. This is one of the few locations that offered a public space for, black individuals to come in and use the bathroom, drink some water, whatever, which he was known to do on an almost daily basis. So, one would assume no problem there. Well, there was an elevator attendant, at the time when, we have people who physically operate the elevator, letting people in, letting people out on the right floor. 17-year-old, Sarah Page, obviously white, she would be there at work that day. We have Dick known to going into the hotel, and all we know is that a scream was heard by Page. It's not sure what she said. Some sources say that she screamed rape or assault, but truly we don't know what happened. And all that would be known is that Dick would be seen running from the elevator, and the following day he would be arrested. By then, newspapers would already be spreading stories about, the assault, a Negro man assaulting, one of their white, young, perfect girls in the elevator, just blatant assault or rape,
Yeah.
In the court of public opinion, he's already been, sentenced and judged. It's a terrible thing, and he has barely already been arrested and hasn't even been to trial.
He doesn't have a chance to protect himself or anything.
No, he does not. But this is, again, another reason why I commend the black community, especially here. Because like I said, the following day he was arrested for allegations, but Sarah, interestingly enough, never pressed charges. She never pressed charges against him. But like I said, it didn't matter because the papers were already convicting him. And once you have, in this environment, a reason to hate a black young man, it kind of is like setting, a match, free in a brush fire, or whatever, and it just shoots up in flames and just goes everywhere.
Yeah,
can't stop it at that point.
It's too late.
It's too late, and a lot of the white individuals around this time, thousands, upon thousands would, they would go to the courthouse and they would, are screaming, to lynch him already. They wanted him gone and dead. They didn't care. All they knew was somebody may have been attacked, and that was enough. That was enough. But again, this is where I commend J.B. Stratford, because he, amongst other, well-respected black individuals in their Greenwood community, would actually arm themselves and go to the jail. They did this twice, actually. I only wrote down that they did it once, but they did it twice, actually. They would go there and offer protection for Dick, because they knew that if the white mob got through, the police more or less wouldn't even be able to stop them, let alone probably try to.
They probably
And he would have been dead before he even got to the courthouse. So they offered to defend him. You know, they knew that this could turn problematic. They knew they were risking their lives, but they were looking out for their own. Again, something I can really commend and appreciate. The first time the police dismissed them and said that it's okay, we have it under control, everything's fine. But then more the mob grew again, and again they get scared for Dick's life. So again, these individuals go back trying to defend Dick in his own jail cell, and that is when there was no names. Again, it's kind of hard to find the right information on this, but there was a white man who would try to disarm one of the black men, screaming and yelling, "What are you going to do with that gun?" To which the young black man replied, "I will use it if I have to." They argued, they struggled, and eventually the gun would fire, hitting the black man, or the white man, not the black man. And he would be, I think he would die from this. But then from there, that was it. The riot started. I say riot, and riot is the wrong term to use because it was not, I'm going to say this is where you got it right. It was not a battle. It was a full-on massacre, a genocide. Because from this event, the black community would try to hide in Greenwood, and they would barricade the railroad tracks, the Frisco tracks, and try to, keep themselves safe. It didn't last long. The whole event lasted, approximately 2 days. Sorry, just...
No,
it's heavy. It's really heavy because especially with all the pictures I was looking at and the
this is, I mean, it's really messed up.
It is
because there's no
trust me, and I'll get to it because like I said, the actual event is quick to get through, but you'll hear something really soon that I'm going to bring up, and it's probably going to really piss you off. Like I said, the whole event would last around 2 days. Buildings would be burned. There was properties that were being shot up. Many men in the streets were just being hunted down. Houses, businesses being blown up or burned. By the white mob that came in. It is estimated that over 1,200 homes and 35 blocks were gone after this tragedy.
Wow!
So think about that. Try to map that in where we live.
And the place wasn't
That's
even that
pretty
big.
much all. No, it wasn't. It's not Houston.
Yeah.
It's not New York. 35 blocks is almost their entire community. 1,200 homes. That's 1,200 families. Either dead or without the necessary things to live. After this, people were forced to live in tents for months, and this is where the cover-up started. Because this is whenever people were reporting that this was a riot. And there's a very important distinction because, especially around this time, the laws, there's no statute of limitations over murder, but there is a statute of limitations over a riot. And the communities at large, addressing this as a riot, basically gave a middle finger to the face and completely ripped out any opportunity for justice from the black community during this time. And this is the sad fact this is the fact that hit me, was that around this time, the cultural attitude towards, photographs of historical events of that were different. Around this time, photographs that were taken of the event were being used as postcards and were labeled the Tulsa race riots. And many pictures would depict burning buildings, dead men in the street, bodies, riddled with bullets hanging off of trucks, and sent out as a postcard. You send a postcard of the Grand Canyon. Yeah. You send a postcard of the Seattle Needle. You don't send a postcard of the man you just butchered.
Yeah, it's like, that's really messed up. But it just shows how much these people didn't think of the black community as all people. They're completely dehumanized. Like, there's no I mean, how can a person be so cold as to just
a lot of this too is many reports and surviving accounts and would tell of a lot of young men would just be handed a gun, like kids, teenagers would just be handed a gun, and then they'd be, led to follow, and follow they did. There's a perfect psychology test that was done in this, I think, 70s or 80s. It's called like the Milgram experiment, that shows our blind compliance to follow orders, even if we don't consciously agree with them. And I believe that that is definitely something big that fed into what happened. That is a big reason why this happened. Because like I said, there's just fear and lack of a proper response, or understanding to an event. And just, of course, the blatant splattering and smearing of, racial ideologies all across Southern America, let alone all of America at this time. Well, it's ridiculous.
What's also really crazy is that all of this happened from the case was so small. It's like, oh, look, somebody commits a crime in Houston, Texas. All of a sudden, half of Houston is burning because one person.
Yeah, it's not something you think of. Because Houston has a population of what, God, I'm trying to remember. It's in the millions. I know that.
But this comes down back to the whole idea that the United States had, where Black people weren't seen as individuals; they were seen as groups.
Yeah.
And if an individual does something, the group did something.
Yeah, it's a marginalized group. If one person was capable of it, so was everyone else. And it's a fucked up mentality.
Which, by the way, we still see to this day.
We see it with everyone. It's unavoidable. It's been so thoroughly bred into us. It takes an active, choice to not, work on it. I will admit to myself, I have moments, like I'm sure everyone does. But it takes that conscious effort of reminding myself, it's just a person. It doesn't matter.
I mean,
it's whatever.
I mean, I think the crazy thing is, and you know what, we can probably talk about this later, but you still see it on the news.
No, of course.
A person says something and they, oh my God. I just gotta say it. You heard it back in 2016. They're all rapists.
Yeah.
They're all criminals. Yes. The vast majority, But I think we're doing better as a whole.
As a whole, I can agree with you to an extent. I think a lot of the oppression, if let's use that word, I think that's just changed. I don't think it's better or worse. I just think it's changed, and that's what skews a lot of people's vision. Yes, we're not fucking going out and lynching people or hanging them off random trees because we felt like they wronged us. But at the same time, we're not giving them, the same opportunities, economically. Black people still have to pay 20% more when it comes to buying their first home. They still have to pay, 15% more during taxes. They still have, there's so much statistics that you can read up and just see that it's still marginalized no matter how you look at it. I'm not the guy that has the answer to the problem. I'm not. I'm just a guy talking about it because it's important to talk about. Yeah. But real quick, there's just a couple more things to bring up about this before we can really just, dive into this discussion. In 1997, there would be a commission formed in Tulsa, Oklahoma that was gathered to document all the events that happened and track down any survivors and get, and record their stories about what happened to really understand the whole gravity of the situation. And one thing that would be discovered is a lot of people were telling stories about how men would be loaded up in trucks, dead bodies would be loaded up in trucks, and they'd see them move away. And they discovered, like I said, there are 3 locations currently where they believe that these bodies are buried in unmarked mass graves. One, because they did radar and what's it called, satellite imaging to check for anomalies in the ground, and they found 3 locations where anomalies were found and believed to be graves. One of these is called New Block Park. Another is called Oakland Cemetery. And the last is called Booker T. Washington Cemetery. Booker T. Washington Cemetery was the one that was the furthest away, whereas New Park and Oakland Cemetery were more or less butting right up next to Tulsa, to Black Wall Street. But that I just wanted to, say before I forgot, because that's the last thing I have in my notes. Like I said, there is so much more information worth, delving into, and this is a piece of history, American history, that I've never heard about until recently, and it's a damn shame. It hurts to hear, but I think it hurts worse to not hear, because it hurts worse to the families who did suffer. It hurts worse for the descendants who hear what happened to grandma, who hear what happened to their grandpa or their mom or whatever.
I feel like it's very important that these lessons get taught at schools, and I mean, especially at a young age, because it's like, look, you can't. I don't. I do believe that there are limits, to what you can tell kids about when they're young.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things that I feel like just everybody has to know. Everybody has to know the horrors of racism, especially back in the day. Back in, this is history, but we learned so much from it.
Yeah,
we should keep learning from it.
Yeah, and of course, we always learn about, the civil rights movement and this, that, and the other. Very important things to remember. They were very monumentous. They helped, us in whole. But we can't erase our tragedy. This isn't even, by the way, this isn't even the worst American tragedy that happened on American soil.
Yeah.
That was perpetuated by Americans. But again, those are can of worms for another time.
Yeah.
But this, like I said, this was just a monumentous event that I felt, like I said, does more harm by not knowing than it does by acknowledging. Because like I said, it took Tulsa fucking how many years? Almost 70 to finally establish a commission to look into it. But I'm glad that they did because, like I said, it hasn't happened yet. It could probably take years to be able to uncover and identify their DNA testing with all the bodies, but there's now an active effort to, take care of these individuals and talk about, digging for them and giving them proper burials.
That's really good.
So, like I said, all this, it was really hard to research this actually. Because as you can see, I only wrote down 3 pages worth of notes, but it could have easily been 8, 9 pages. Because like I said, there was so much that was worth talking about. It was just really hard to find out, what's doing justice to the story and what's overkill. It was very hard to find that line. But, like I said, especially with everything that's been going on in the last 2 decades, with, all the cop shootings and all the conflicting reports and videos that you can find online of cops planting drugs on people, of shooting, victims who obviously weren't armed or complying even.
Yeah.
It's just a different form of hate that we see now. And it sucks that it still happens,
The thing is, like, in a lot of these, there are a lot of areas in the United States that are extremely racist.
Yeah.
And, we know it's true. You can't just deny it. Like, it's absolutely true.
You can't sweep it under the rug.
I think what's happening now, it's kind of changing shape. The aggressions against colored people or anyone really who isn't just white or straight in America, it's changing from being very vocal to being a little more. It's the microaggressions, or it's the laws that are being changed that, like, that's really odd. Why would you change a law that allows medical experts to
XYZ and it's just
it's the kind of stuff where a person can very easily make an argument about how it's not racist, even though it is.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Community, in any sense of the word, will always be complicated. That much is true. It's just, it takes level-headed individuals who are willing to take those seconds to really contemplate things and to really take outsider opinions and views into consideration to get anything done. Most decisions, in life, whether it's politics, whether it's a personal decision, whether it's business, whatever, a lot of the times we're biased. Sometimes we're too biased. And it leads to shit like this. And it perpetuates, throughout history. Reasons become muddied in water. It becomes, overcomplicated for unnecessary reasons. It's horrible, And this by no means really, gets to the heart of the racial debates or conversation, I should say, not debates. And it does nothing to help. I know it doesn't, but like I said, it was important to bring up because when I heard about the story, I had actually reached out to a very good friend of mine. His name is Darius. I'm not going to say his last name, for his privacy, but I asked Darius, about certain things that would be worth looking up. And this was a topic he spat out and in an instance, true to form, he didn't tell me anything about it. He just said, look into it. It will change your views on a lot of things. And it didn't change my views on things because, I already knew how bad things could be, but it really showed just that level of depravity that people can get to. It's no rape of Nanking. It's no, London bombing, but it just really goes to show you just the personal hatred that people use for no reason. And I say personal, but in reality, this was as impersonal as it can get. It was just the simple fact that somebody didn't like your skin, and they'll use any reason to hate you.
It's just rage. And
it is.
The crazy thing, though, is you also got to keep in mind, at this point in time, this isn't too, the world is changing really quickly.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many people were afraid of it. People were afraid of this.
Here's the thing. Yes, fear was a big reason, but jealousy was probably the biggest thing. Because you got to realize, a lot of these, the Tulsa, riot, as a lot of people have called it, like I said, it's really not a riot. It was a fucking bloodbath. It was a massacre.
Genocide.
It was a genocide of an entire population.
Yeah.
More or less, we can't say genocide because there were people who lived. Genocide would. But either way, semantics not important right now. It really was a matter of a lot of white people in this community were very jealous, because a lot of the black individuals around this time, they would have, pianos and ballrooms in their house, and then you'd have the white individuals on the other side of the tracks be like, how the fuck do they get that and I don't? And it was in part from this mentality of entitlement that you get over this other, group of individuals, purely based on you being told you're white, so you're better because God made you better, and this mentality or whatever. It makes no sense. It's completely stupid. And here's my biggest thing. Obviously, knowing what I know now, in this hypothetical timeline, if I were thrown back, I would do everything I can to advocate for people not to hate them. And the argument that I came up with was this, take your car, for example, right? Would you get mad and angry if your car just started performing better? If your car just started, exceeding your expectations? No.
Yeah.
So I look at, this specific black community, let's use the analogy. Let's say they're a machine. Why would you hate the machine for being better? It's outperforming. Instead of hating it, learn how to adapt and apply it and, make everything else better, I think, if there were true attempts, and obviously I could spit out my hypothetical whatever till the ends of times, and I'll say what I want to happen. Doesn't mean it'll happen, doesn't mean it would ever be likely or even conceivable. But, I think if something like that were to have happened, it really could have changed how, course of history would have went. We probably would have had, civil rights movements much earlier. We would probably be far more progressed now. We wouldn't have such disproportionate, economic values per individual now like we do, it sucks because it was such an anomaly. There were, like I said, there were other Black Wall Street-like events, but this was the biggest one. And I think that's part of the reason, biggest one that I know of, I should say, because there probably is something bigger and I didn't look into it, so I don't want to say that and be wrong. But from what I saw, it is just monumentously destructive, and just to this day I still can't find any valid reason. I don't think anybody could, But I think it's important to understand, how far we can let ourselves go when we don't pay attention, when we don't take the time to slow down and really think. We don't think about our actions. We don't think about consequences, and then shit like this happens.
Yeah. I really do feel like thinking about it right now. What's coming to mind is I think these people just were afraid of losing any bit of power that they had.
No, yeah, and without a doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, think about it. Seeing the people that not too long ago were way lower than you. They were slaves to the white man. Seeing them
literally
grow a
believed
community.
to not be human, mind you.
Yeah, of course. And then seeing them grow a community that's just as good, if not better.
Outdid you.
Yeah. That outdid you.
I personally can't say anything other than I'm impressed.
Yeah.
You know?
And these people saw it as a threat.
Yes, they saw it. Woo!
Yeah.
That would be interesting to hear back. For those listening, I accidentally just dropped a bar stool on my freaking shin, and that hurts so bad. Ow.
You okay?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right. But
It just hit me like right here, just under the knee, but not quite like under the patella or whatever. So.
All right. Well, at least you're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
But like I was saying, it's this whole idea that a person could lose power, a person could. And you know what? We're still seeing it to this day. It's the whole like, oh, I'm afraid of losing my job. You know, they're gonna take my job away from me. You know, jobs.
And then your health is failing.
Yeah.
You know, your rent is falling behind. You know, it's stupid. You know, but economics and stuff is again stuff. It's worth its own discussion.
And,
you know, but go on.
I was gonna say, and I feel like this is just a problem that America has had for the longest time. Is the afraid that you know. Is it possible that somebody could be better than me? Is it possible that something could be better than America, better than my family? You know? And
there's a lot of philosophy that I've dipped my toes in that researches around that idea of, you know, men being equal or not and stuff. So, I can see where these mentalities come from, but I still can't agree with it on a fundamental level. I can't.
It's like I said, I think it's something we have to get over. Sometimes we have to get over, like, because we all get jealous. We all absolutely get jealous.
Yeah.
But like it's you know, you can't let that jealousy get to you or guide your actions. And this, by the way, this is racism and jealousy. It's both things. And I'm sure like if this was white people, this would never have happened because
to these would have probably been some court filing documentation or whatever, and then be lost to history.
Yeah, like. Oh my gosh! If any of these people were white, the whole thing would be different. Like, you know, the guy who got arrested, if he was white,
Dick Rowland.
Yeah.
If he was white, this would have never been an issue. It probably would have been a civil instance that was hushed by the community and then forgotten about.
Exactly.
You know, and lost to time. Nobody knows. You know, I don't know a rape trial that happened in fucking 1930 whatever. I don't know of a murder trial that happened in the 1970s. I don't know. I don't know, but like this didn't happen that way, and we as a society became all the worse for it, not because we were just so horrible to a part of our own community, but because we forgot it.
Yeah.
We neglected it. That to me is the biggest tragedy, the biggest crime out of all this is that we let ourselves forget. Even Tulsa as a whole, more or less, let themselves forget up until 1997 when they formed that committee to really look into it and do some due justice to these individuals. Because like I was reading or watching a report by one of these people, he says, you know, it happened almost 100 years ago. That's still someone's grandma. That's still someone's brother. That's still someone's dad. That's still someone's, you know, sister. It's still someone's family. And it's worth investigating whether it was a murder that happened 2 years ago or 98 years ago. You know, it's worth spending your time to do them justice, you know. And me personally, you know, I know we're coming to the end of this. I hope I at least did some, you know, justice in enlightening the story to those who are listening. I just pray that I did not do more harm. I always pray that when I cover or talk about these that I'm not doing more harm than good. Because like I said, I really feel like these are just things that are, you know, worth knowing even if we hate it. Because it really shows you where we come from as a whole. You know, yes, I may or may not have had family in some blood lineage that was directly related to this. I may or may not have had some family that was directly opposed to this in a completely another state that's just appalled by the news. I don't know. I'm me. That's all I know. You know? All I know is as an individual, I'd rather know my history, so when history starts to repeat itself, I know how to not do that.
Yeah, it's absolutely important that we still talk about this.
Yes.
I think history is so very important to us as a culture, as society, as individuals, to know what happened before our time, and to be able to catch these things, to catch like the mistakes that we're currently making. That we're, by the way, history repeats itself. It is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I don't know, every single time, like during history class, that phrase would repeat itself in my head. history's repeating itself. History's repeating itself because I would notice.
Yeah. I mean, you see stuff, all the time where, people scream, oh, we gotta do this to avoid this because this happened, because history will repeat itself, and yada, 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 yada. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Some things will just keep repeating itself until we fundamentally change ourselves as a species. But we can only do that on a personal level.
Yeah.
We can't force other people to change. It just doesn't happen. But like I said, I hope you all learned something out of this. Like I said, with certain topics like this, I had a difficult time, really researching it. Because I'm a person that feels. I let myself feel a lot.
Yeah.
I try to empathize with what goes on, even if I have no direct or personal connection to these stories. I try to imagine if my boots were on the ground at that time, if I was there. What would it be like? And I try to visualize the environment. I try to visualize the panic, the fear. And whatever I visualize will never compare to what happened. But from what I, personally allowed myself to try to experience was more than enough for me to be like, how could we let that happen?
I think I definitely learned something from this. This was very good, by the way. This is a very good topic.
Of course.
Very eye-opening.
Yeah, well, hopefully next week's subject will be just as illuminating for all of us, because next week we're covering, COVID-19 and pandemics in general. And it's important, it's relevant, it's necessary information, because when you really look into it and really understand the data we're getting now, which changes every hour on the hour, as we're learning new things, we're realizing just how different this virus is. And because of its novel nature, novel in terms of, viral pandemics and stuff being, we've never seen this before. This has never happened before. We are not prepared. When you come across that, you have to truly understand why, certain actions and precautions need to be taken. A little quick fact, which I know off the top of my head, I hear people all the time saying, oh, I've already had the flu, I've had this, I'll get over it. This ain't the flu. Mm-hmm. This has nothing to do with the flu. Absolutely. This is not even in the same family as viruses as the flu or anything like that. It is completely different on how it attacks you. Just because you've been immunized or already had the flu or whatever, that does nothing for this. That's a completely different problem. That is like trying to treat tinnitus with fucking, autism medicine. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
There's just no correlation there. So that's why, next week we're going to cover pandemics as a whole, kind of go through a brief, overview of, the history of how we learned to deal with illnesses, how we learned about bacteria and viruses, and how we learned to treat them and stuff. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty facts of COVID-19, how it's been spreading, what we know so far, and ways to protect ourselves. So that's next week, and we're, we're constantly evolving our podcast,
Of course.
We're figuring ourselves out. So hopefully, I know I didn't mention it in the start, because I was kind of hesitant to mention it, but due to a personal friend of mine, we now have an intro and outro that we've both listened to, we both agree on.
Oh, absolutely.
So, assuming we're not idiots, and it's actually played in the beginning, you just heard from my friend Nathan, from his band Dire Reckoning. I almost said Dire Rising again, and I don't know. I know why I say that, because I'm a big fan of Nazi zombies, and there's a level in Black Ops 2 called Die Rise, and I say that all the time when I say his band, and I get mad at myself. Oh, it's so stupid.
It's cool. It's cool.
But
Dire Rising?
Yes, Dire Reckoning.
Reckoning, not
That's
Rising.
his band. Dire Reckoning.
You got me saying it too.
Yeah, I know. I mess it up with myself all the time.
Dire Reckoning.
The band is Dire Reckoning. His name is Nathan. I will leave his band page on the description below. And yeah, by all means, if he allows me to, I'll even add his little Instagram or whatever he wants to promote for social media. Follow him. He's definitely worth, a listen to. Definitely deserves the praise that he needs to get. Yeah, sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but I wanted to at least acknowledge him because he openly agreed to help, with no questions or anything. He just kind of jumped on board because music's his life, man.
Yeah.
It really is. And so to have someone who's so passionate about that and be so willing to help out because he knows podcasting for me, that's what I've always wanted to get into.
And he's done such a fantastic job too.
Yeah, and he's also working on possible, segments, sound cues for whenever like I said, whenever we get our structure really solidified, in our schedules. Because we're still, I'm working on my own personal life. You're still working, and possibly moving. Don't know.
That's up in the air.
I still got to get my van. I still got to get the website up. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and this is a very, very busy time. But to be honest, I don't know if we would have gotten this started the time we did.
Yeah. I personally, I couldn't take doing nothing anymore.
Yeah.
I've been saying, excuse me, I don't know why I keep burping, but I've been saying for over 2 years, I want to do a podcast, and I've never done it. And I've done nothing but kick myself in the ass over it. I couldn't let, a situation like this go by and me still do nothing.
Yeah.
I would have hated myself. I would never forgiven myself.
And this has definitely kept me busy during the downtime. So
yeah. And, I feel pretty productive. We have some encouraging audience members, who have been giving us input. And to address something real quick, I know about our audio quality. I know how we can do better. Right now, that's more of a financial constraint than me just not being prepared.
Our audio equipment is a Samsung phone.
Yeah, it's literally just a cell phone, which I'm amazed it sounds as good as it does.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too when I heard it. I was like, oh, this is...
It does sound good.
I can hear it, and it doesn't make me want to pull my ears out.
Yeah. I actually take very good care of the audio side of my phone because I care a lot about the music I listen to, and I make a lot of personal recordings as notes rather than physically writing notes because it's quicker for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I hope this was a topic, you guys learned a lot from. I hope you guys, have a new appreciation for history.
Yeah.
Because every time I research these topics, subjects that you don't learn about in school or isn't discussed often, or if anything could just be internet folklore, you still, there's still a spark of truth somewhere. There's still things to learn. There's still, lessons in a sense that we could learn from.
I agree.
It's just, it really goes to show you what's out there, what we're capable of, and if this is the worst that we can be, I want to know what's the best we can be.
Absolutely.
Which is another reason why I believe this is worth talking about. But we're rambling on. I'm rambling on mostly.
No, that's cool. But I really do, before we close, I really did enjoy this topic. I thought it was really, really enlightening, and I actually really do like these true these cases where I never heard about this.
Yeah, true historical events.
Yeah, of course this is the obscura part because this is somewhat obscure. I'm surprised.
Well, my biggest thing was, and I know I'm very general whenever I describe what our podcast is about. I may say, we try to cover taboo, obscure, or just morbid curiosities. But in general, I wanted to just talk about things that I was personally interested in, but also isn't, common knowledge. So to a degree, it's kind of like, a gradient scale. It's not it either fits here or it doesn't kind of deal.
Yeah.
It's just, how do I personally feel about this topic, being something that most people don't know? That's usually the first question. And the second question I ask myself is, how dedicated or how much information is there available for this topic to discuss? Because if I didn't ask myself that second question, I could have an entire episode of 5 different things and just give you, this happened with this case, this happened with this case, and so on. Yeah. And I would not be personally happy with that.
Yeah, I think the discussion alone really made this work. Because if just given the story the way it's given, just if you laid it out, I'm sure it's
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about other tough subjects such as racial inequality, LGBTQ topics, financial disproportionates.
Yeah. But the story I'm working on is it happened recently, 1996.
That's not too recent.
For me it's.
That was a year after I was born.
That's the year I was born.
So, is it that recent?
Yeah, okay, maybe, you know what? I keep forgetting. That's 2020
Yeah,
years
it's
ago.
2020. That's 2 decades ago.
I keep... Anyways, point being, the events that happened, they feel like something that could have happened today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get what you mean.
Yeah.
But, we hope you all enjoyed. Please follow us on our Instagram and Twitter. We are trying to become more active. I know I personally am not very good at social media just because I don't really use technology. And I don't mean to say it like I fell out of time from like the 1800s. I get how a computer works. I get how a phone works. I just don't actively use it. Just because it's never was something I personally felt like tied to, I don't feel glued to my cell phone or my laptop or my tablet or anything like that. I just never have.
And when I use social media, I just kind of look at what other people have to say. I mean, I don't post a lot. I really don't. And I'm also used to communicate with friends.
Yeah. That's primarily what I use my phone for, is I have Messenger, and that's 90% of what I use Facebook for, is to message people. And that's it. But with all that being said, hopefully I was smart enough to get the outro working. And we can't wait to see you guys again. Yeah. Listen to our stories and the tales we find, and hopefully we all learn something and grow to be better people. With that being said, this was Aaron.
This is Vladimir.
And we hope you have a good day.
All right. Adios.
Bye.